Pompey Sound, your hourly update from Fratton Park, sponsored by Piglet's Pantry, the home of award-winning and handmade food on the South Coast.
John Mousinho admits there have been ruthless decisions to end some players' Fratton Park futures this season. You have to be ruthless. Unfortunately, sentiment doesn't count for anything in the game. We are trying to win games of football. Winning games of football sometimes involves leaving players out, although, based on their past performances at the football club, they don't deserve to be left out. Will Norris is a very, very good example of that. That was a really tough one for us. We also had a couple of signings in the summer that we decided to move on in January. You have to make sure you're ruthless and clinical in terms of the way we approach things. Any decision we make is hopefully going to improve us and give us a better chance of winning games. That's the only reason why we made those decisions. Will was a really tough one. He went to Wycombe, he's done really well, and they are challenging for promotion. We thought it was the right time to bring Nico in, and he has been absolutely outstanding this year. Sorensen was a bit unlucky, to be honest. Colby came back quicker than expected, and that left us with a few centre-forwards in the building, so it was only fair to give Eli that opportunity to go in January. Sammy Silveira was one that hadn't quite worked out. Maybe that was a playing style issue because we changed it. Maybe he was suited to a side which was a bit more possession dominant. That has happened to a couple of players. Which is fine, and I will take that on board. I had spoken about recruitment in the summer and said this is how we want to improve, and didn't necessarily stick to that. So we had to change things quickly. Sammy in particular was probably a victim of that. The most important thing is firstly not to make any poor decisions, but also not to stick with someone for the sake of it. If you've made a mistake, you've made a mistake, let's move on.
One local Portsmouth newspaper, because things are quiet, have been asking readers, or at least people who follow them on Twitter and Instagram and what have you, whether Pompey should chase Alex Robertson and re-sign him. And not surprisingly, they got some interesting but negative, of course, responses from those that bother with such questions.
James, nope. Would rather beg West Ham to let us have Potts on loan for another season to help with his development. Potts is twice the player Robertson is. Joe Blackman, no. Made his choice. Chose Cardiff. End of. Ali Lance, missed half the season, went on loan with us in League One, and has then struggled for form and fitness this season with Cardiff. A grand total of 3 goals this season for an attacking midfielder doesn't scream sign me. Rich Anthony, we should sound out whoever the club believes to be good enough for the club going forward, whether that is Alex Robertson or anyone else. It's unrealistic to hold grudges against players for playing elsewhere. They're entitled to move around just as anyone else is entitled to change employer. Vincent Coleman, no, he had his chance to join us and he turned his back on our football club. Russell James told everyone Cardiff was the right club to carry on his progress. He'll be a decent League One player if he can stay fit. Michael Hinks, he had his chance at Pompey, will be remembered as a League One title winner who missed half of that campaign, then chose the move to Cardiff due to his family connection. Michael at the time said he hadn't seen such wages for a player at that point in their career. I wish him well, but it's a no from me.
It's noticeable that they only quote the people who use what appears to be some kind of a real name when they attach their views to a name and post it on Twitter, X, Instagram, whatever, because I think I'm right in saying something like 95% of people have a strange moniker. You know, Glad Rags 666 is much more normal than Fred Blogs. But all of the 8 or 9 people that were quoted there appear to have used their real name. Are they all genuine? Oh, I could not possibly comment. I'm not a journalist of the calibre of those gentlemen and women who work at this particular local newspaper. I just had 20 years in Fleet Street. So how can I hold a candle? And sometimes you embellish for the sake of creating interesting copy. However, let's go to the heart of the matter. Would we welcome Alex Robertson back? The obvious answer is, and it's doubly obvious, yes. Because whilst he was playing for us, everybody was saying the same thing. He's the classiest player we've seen on Fratton Park's pitch since Robert Proźnecki. Of course, he's no Proźnecki, but then nobody ever was, or would aspire to be. But he was a proper footballer. And one of the guys who sits close to me, where I sit watching the game, actually was heard saying to someone, he's a cynic. He's one of those Pompey fans, and they're entirely entitled to be cynical and hangdog and moan. And he said, he's a footballer, isn't he? Because he is a footballer. And there are people saying we'd rather have Freddie Potts any day of the week. Well, somebody says I would rather have Freddie Potts every day of the week. Potts is great, but he doesn't do much with the ball. Sorry, have a look. He's two-touch Potts. He'll touch it and he'll move it on. He's aware of where the person is that he wants to pass the ball to, so that when he gets the ball, he knows exactly what to do with it. One touch and move it on. Robertson had presence on the ball, and he could send a telling pass forward whenever it was the right thing to do. And we haven't seen anybody of his like at Fratton Park since he left, since he was injured, strangely, and left. So would we have him back? Oh, there's all these queries about, well, can he maintain his fitness? You can say that about any footballer. You can say that about anybody. Will he or she maintain their fitness? Did the person who posted that caveat, is that person sure that they will maintain their fitness for the next couple of years? How can you tell? You'd need a crystal ball. And that's people who aren't flying in for 50-50s for a living 98 minutes out of every week. Or every 5 days if they're playing midweek. So, two things. One, you have to treat with intelligence all the stuff that's reported that you read, of course. And two, you have to recognise that Pompey Sound are right and that we would love to have Robertson back because he's a proper footballer.
Jacob has gone back to Australia. He's doing the final bits of his rehab programme with the Australian FA because there is a physio out there. This will enable us to get him back much earlier. So rather than giving him the summer break at the season's end, we've decided to let him return to Australia earlier, so he can come back to us early and will be at it for pre-season. Jacob will be working with the national team physio, so we know he's in good hands. We clearly have a very good relationship with him. Fellow Australians Hayden Matthews, ankle, and Thomas Waddingham, hamstring, are still working with Pompey's medical team ahead of Saturday's final match of the season against Hull. Matthews last month underwent surgery on the right ankle he broke against QPR in February, while Waddingham hasn't featured since damaging his hamstring on his Blues' full debut at Coventry earlier this month.
Yeah, we've cozied right up to the Australian FA, haven't we, as a club? They like us and we like them, and they've helped us find some pretty good young players who may well turn out to be the bedrock of a Premier League side in 2 or 3 years' time. So we're not going to stop doing that. So the question is, which Australian are we? No, we can't anticipate to that extent. Although the question can still be asked, which Australian will we bring in next? We've obviously got good spies out there, good intelligence, and a good relationship with the powers that be in Australian football and also some of the clubs, the big clubs that are out there. A lot of the players who are coming through the ranks in Australia, if you do your research, are not, as it were, Australian born and bred. They are not the Williamsons and the Smiths of this world. They are the sons and grandsons of people who emigrated to Australia from other parts, particularly Eastern Europe, where, of course, football is quite rightly the number one sport, along with being the number one sport, of course, in the United Kingdom. But those bases are covered. What's going on is that Pompey are looking for players who have a natural footballing pedigree. They have football in their DNA, but they've also picked up something of the Australian absolute determination to be as good as you can possibly be and to win. So when John Messino says we are looking far and wide for players this summer, I think it's reasonable to suggest that one of the furthest and widest places they're looking is Australia. And at Pompey Sound, we are investigating this kid. He's 19, but he's playing for Australia's under-23s. And he's been looked at, we know, by Liverpool and Manchester United, or is it City? And a couple of other Premier League clubs, and north of the border by Rangers as well. And they're toying with the idea, but we think it's very likely that he is one of the players worldwide that's on our radar. So we'll do a piece about him shortly, in the not-too-distant future, when perhaps we can firm up some of the speculation about him. But he looks very exciting. He's diminutive. He's extremely quick. He scores goals from outside the box and inside the box. And he models himself on Lionel Messi. And, well, that's not bad for starters, is it?